Hey, good evening, everybody. Dr. Nathan Thompson with Exemplify Health Center, Wellsway affiliate right here in Yorkville, Illinois. Happy Monday evening, guys. Welcome back from Thanksgiving. I hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving weekend. If you are watching live right now, make sure you say hello. Let me know where you're watching from. And thank you to those who submitted questions beforehand. I appreciate that. I'm going to try to get to all the questions, hopefully, and maybe even have a little bit of extra time at the end to answer some of your questions. So thanks again for submitting them. I think we're going to answer probably about 8 questions that I have selected. And if you do have any more questions, just go ahead and put them in the comments below so that I can see those questions. And again, if we have a little bit of extra time, I'll make sure that we or try to answer those questions and try to be as brief as possible. So if you guys are joining me again, thank you again for joining. And again, make sure you say hello. Let me know where you're watching from in the United States or Canada or in Europe or in Australia, New Zealand, people from all around the world that watch. I'm always sincerely grateful and honored and humbled too that you guys would actually listen to what I have to say and find it interesting for most of you. So guys, question and answer live while we are waiting for people to join. Just a couple of things, guys. A lot of people will message me and ask me questions about this or about that. And many times, guys, doing this for so many years, we will have an abundance of videos either on YouTube or on Rumble. And to go back and look at those, actually all of our videos minus a couple are on YouTube. I mean, some of them are even 5 and 6 years old. We started to put a lot of our videos on Rumble over the last year just because YouTube has deleted some of the most important videos that I've ever put out. And so in regards to the COVID, et cetera, jab, a lot of those have been deleted by YouTube, and they are still, you can find those on Rumble as well. So we will upload a lot of our videos to YouTube and then also to Rumble. Sometimes YouTube takes those down, and but you will find them on Rumble, especially over the last 15 months or so. So make sure you follow at Dr. Nathan Thompson on YouTube and on Rumble. And you know, guys, it's an easy way because not everyone is on Facebook, and we realize that, so that's why we will upload some of those, actually all of these videos that we do to YouTube and then obviously to Rumble. So that way you can share links with other people. Especially if you have something important that you would like to share with those. And again, guys, if you're from the Yorkville area, from the Chicagoland area, I should say, and you want to work with us and with Exemplify Health Center and be able to not only learn our approach, be able to experience really healing from 3 perspectives: inflammation, physical, chemical, mental, physical, chemical, mental. Then make sure, guys, you go to the top of the page and register for our last inflammation talk of the year. It's going to be on Tuesday, which is a week from tomorrow, December 8th, I believe, or 7th, whatever that Tuesday is, at 6 o'clock p.m. This is an in-person event. I know we had some people who registered thinking it was an online event, and this is an in-person event. Specifically. So guys, when it comes to inflammation, if you don't know how to handle that, you don't know what your triggers are, first and foremost, anything you do after that is actually, it just doesn't work. So just remember, you can't heal from a scab on your knee if you keep falling down on it. And so you have to know first and foremost truly what those inflammatory triggers are and how to avoid them, how to lower inflammation, because it's then and only then will your hormones recover. Will you actually be able to lose weight, especially when it comes to substantial fat loss? Guys, cancer is huge when it comes to inflammation. And again, hormones, thyroid issues, joint pain, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune conditions, all of those things are really tied first and foremost around inflammation. And guys, it's the body adapting to inflammation. And once you guys understand that, guys, even when we're talking about adrenal issues, it's not adrenal fatigue, it's adrenal downregulation. And in fact, I've even saw this with a new patient, has zero energy whatsoever, and every natural doctor was trying to support their adrenal glands. But actually, when you look at what was happening on the labs, it's the body saying, I am downregulating my adrenal glands so that I have an anti-inflammatory effect in order to help with a specific infection that I am going through. And the amazing thing is no one else can spot it, But if you understand how the body works, you understand, my goodness, you're dealing with an infection. You're not going to have any energy if you're dealing with an infection. And that's why so many people are struggling with energy issues, because they're inflamed. So guys, I want you to think inflammation up and energy goes down, inflammation goes down, energy can go back to normal. But there's so many natural practitioners out there that think everything is tied around adrenal fatigue, and it's simply not the case. It has to do with the body's response to inflammation. So guys, get registered for that if you are from the Chicagoland area. I promise you it'd be worth your while. It is. There's so many things that not only you will learn, but also knowing the first steps you need to take in order to experience true health freedom, especially. So before I go over question and answer, I want to show you an article that's really interesting. And it has to do with hormones, but you're going to see, even when it comes to doctors and cardiologists and internal medicine specialists, is that, again, more of the same approach produces the same result. And so that's why, guys, you have to look at things so much from a different perspective. And the reason why within the Wellness Way approach, why we're able to solve problems that others can't, is because actually my background allows me to look at things from a different perspective. You will see that in so many fields, they're coming from a medical perspective, which means problem and solution with a drug, or even natural health providers is problem and solution with a supplement. But once you start looking at everything from a whole and looking at it from a different perspective, you'll be able to solve things differently. And I'm going to give you a perfect example, guys. This comes from Helio Health News, and it comes from JAMA Open Network. They're reporting on an actual article and research from the Journal of American Medical Association Network Open. And it's called Irregular Long Menstrual Cycles May Be Indicative of Future Cardiovascular Disease. Now, when you look at their approach, one of the things that they're saying, well, if you have hormone issues, then it means that you're going to have cardiovascular disease. And so one of the things that they said that they kept pounding on is, well, if you have polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS, then that is indicative possibly of you having cardiovascular disease later on in life, like heart disease. Just remember this, guys, is that once menopause happens, if you still have those problems, without the anti-inflammatory protective effects of estrogen, a woman will quickly catch up as far as cardiovascular disease. And that's because if you have inflammation after menopause, ladies, is when you're going to notice it first and foremost. So they keep saying, well, it's because you have polycystic ovarian syndrome. And guys, if you look at women who have PCOS, one of the first things that they actually put a woman on is actually metformin. Okay. Now, you have to start looking at the reasons why there is PCOS. One of the biggest drivers of PCOS, and guys, please share this video if you know anyone who has PCOS, is actually an abundance of anabolic hormones. Okay. So testosterone, for example, if you look at anyone with PCOS, they will have a problem with insulin. And so if you measure their insulin levels, they're usually very sky high. And remember this, insulin is very anabolic. You don't believe me? Look at someone who is like a power lifter, for example, and you will notice that they eat a lot of sugar that's producing an insulin response. And insulin is actually very pro-anabolic, very pro-muscle growth. And so usually when you're looking at women with PCOS, you're going to see a couple of things: high testosterone levels, high insulin levels, and usually they'll have some kind of issue within the gastrointestinal system that can actually also affect their estradiol metabolism. For example, like when you look at short chain fatty acid production within the gastrointestinal system. So there's more than one reason why this is happening, but you'll see patterns with PCOS. And so, guys, I want you guys to realize is that what is one of the drivers in cardiovascular disease is actually the overconsumption of sugars. And that drives a high insulin response. It leads to insulin resistance. And also, guys, when you start having insulin resistance, you're gonna become very chronically inflamed. And we look at cardiovascular disease. Cardiovascular disease, it's an inflammatory issue. It has to be, because what else would cause deposition of calcium within the arteries. What else would produce narrowing of the arteries? It's the deposition of calcium. And what causes the deposition of calcium is actually having an immune response at the endothelial lining of your arteries. And one of the things that drives that is actually the overconsumption of sugar that drives up inflammation. And the body has to heal and has to repair that damage that takes place to the arterial lining. And so, it's the same thing over and over again, is whatever condition that you have, it's tied to inflammation. It's plain and it's simple. And the answer is not to say, well, we need to get to this polycystic ovarian syndrome, and we need to give the person metformin. We need to give them, certain things in order to induce aromatization of testosterone into estradiol, because their approach will always be this for that and more drugs rather than trying to get to the cause. And guys, let me tell you something. One of my biggest pet peeves is when natural health doctors talk about we got to get to the root cause, but they still don't get to the root cause because they're still trying to dump a bunch of vitamins and supplements without actually getting to the root cause. And so it's a lot deeper than taking a this for that approach, but we've still got a lot of questions from people who ask questions about what supplements should I take for this and for that. And guys, all you're doing is just still practicing medicine, but it's just a more natural approach to medicine. And it's time that we start looking deeper and deeper and deeper. Okay. So let's answer a couple of questions, guys. And again, if I have a little bit of time left over, we'll try to answer a couple of ones, and I'll scroll through the feed just to see if any of you have any questions. So if you do, please leave them in the comments below. And then once I get to the end, I'll see if there's any other questions that I can answer. All right. So again, guys, if you're watching, make sure you say hello. Let me know where you're watching from. First question actually comes from Michelle. Michelle, thank you for submitting your question. Michelle asked, my sister recently started taking herbs for having parasites found on her stool test. 2 days after starting the herbs, she had an allergic reaction. Is it possible to have anaphylaxis allergy to herbs? Let me answer by saying this, okay? First and foremost, if someone has parasites on a stool test, there are many things going wrong on the digestive system, starting first with the stomach, okay? So I want you to think about the stomach, the purpose of the stomach and subsequent release of stomach acids to actually sterilize the food, be able to kill off things like parasites, like bacteria, things like that. So stomach acid is first and foremost designed to, when you have enough, to sterilize your food, and secondarily to help you start the process of breaking down your proteins. So if someone has a problem with parasites, chances are they're very, very low in stomach acid, and that's one of the reasons why people develop parasites. So you have to get stomach acid in order, because when you're looking at parasites, when you're looking at bacterial overgrowth, when you're looking at small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, things like that, even yeast, a lot of that is regulated by how much stomach acid you are secreting. So the upper part will dictate what's happening below. But there are so many times where we're going after taking probiotics, we're running after all of these different things, or doing a parasite cleanse when we haven't actually fixed one of the main causes of why it's happening in the first place. Now, is it possible to have an anaphylaxis allergy to herbs? I would say probably no. And the reason why is you probably, as they started doing some things, probably seeing that the parasites aren't very happy with it. And in fact, one of the ways that you'll know if someone has parasites is actually if you do a food allergy test, and if they have a lot of IgE type reactions or anaphylactic reactions to specific foods, and chances are they probably have some kind of parasite that's going on. And not only that, even if you do some blood work and you're looking at basophils, eosinophils, and things like that on a CBC with a differential, you'll always will see that those things are actually elevated. Now, the only time that someone can have a reaction to an herb is, I'll give you an example, is that some people actually have an IgE allergy to ragweed, for example. And there actually are some herbs that come from a ragweed family. And so if someone has a ragweed allergy, sometimes you give them chamomile, and they won't have a reaction that is they're going to die from it, but they will have an anaphylactic type reaction to those if they have a ragweed allergy and, for example, you're also giving them chamomile. So is it possible to have a reaction to an herb? Yes, absolutely, guys. But please, guys, quit going to Google and asking Medscape or asking the Mayo Clinic or asking WebMD about the safety of herbs because, guys, these things are well documented that they're safe. And a lot of times they try to steer you away from herbs and natural things and try to steer you towards taking their medication. And I'll give you a perfect example, guys, of just sometimes how ridiculous that this is that an endocrinologist gave a woman basically birth control because I don't know why, because I'm looking at this and I'm wondering, and maybe just because it said, oh, we're going to try to get your progesterone levels up. But the progesterone, the birth control, progesterone-based birth control was putting her into atrial fibrillation. She said, I ran out of my birth control. I decided not to refill it, and my AFib went away. I told my doctor, he said, stay on the birth control, and my AFib came back. And I told him this, and he said, well, stay on the birth control. We'll also put you on a medication for AFib. So it makes you wonder, guys, manipulating your hormones when they're trying to respond to inflammatory triggers is one of the silliest things that you can do because all you're doing is putting hormones in the body in which the body prefers them not to be there, especially. So, Michelle, I hope this answers your question. Again, thank you for this question. Shannon Watkin Fennel asked a really awesome question. Probably a lot of you have. She says, I've switched to different types of sugar substitutes like monk fruit and stevia, but they both have erythritol in them. Is erythritol okay to use? All right, so let me answer this question, all right? The first thing is we just finished up 3 weeks of no sugar with a group of 200 people. And the first thing that I told them is I say, guys, when you go no sugar, the whole idea is to really adjust your palate and to stop trying to go to sweet all the time and actually start enjoying other tastes, specifically like bitter, for example. And so we always want to do these these natural sweeteners, and certainly they would be better than being on Ace K, aspartame, Splenda, and things like that, because those things are very hard on the gut microbiome specifically. But when you think of this, the first thing that I would want to answer this question is why are you trying to use so many sugar substitutes? Okay. When you're talking about sugar substitutes, stevia, monk fruit, they're still processed, but they are considered natural. I would say the best ones would be stevia. The best ones would be monk fruit. But if you're getting a stevia that contains erythritol, you should get a straight stevia sweetener, because things like Truvia, which is the brand name, also will contain erythritol. So it's cut usually with stevia and erythritol. You also have things like xylitol. Xylitol and erythritol are considered sugar alcohols, which means they're just like sugar, and then they have an hydroxyl group attached to them. So the body can't break them down, but they still have the taste of being sweet, okay? Now, I would say I would be okay with xylitol as long as it's coming from birch and it's not derived from genetically modified corn. But what about erythritol, okay? Now, one of the things with this is that if you look at some of the side effects of xylitol and erythritol, is that it can cause loose stool and it can cause some bloating. Now, why is that? If you are consuming erythritol and xylitol and you're getting stomach upset and you're getting some bloating, then chances are you probably need to run a stool test and look at what is growing within the large intestine, because certain bacterial overgrowths can take actually erythritol and ferment it, which will produce gassing and bloating and things like that. And so that's why I said, I can't have it because I'm bloating. Well, chances are there's probably something happening within the gastrointestinal system that you should have tested. Now, what's interesting is if you've ever heard of a FODMAP diet, so the FODMAP, which is fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols, so that popularized this diet saying, hey, you need to avoid these. They're very simple sugars, and sugar alcohols is basically what it says. And so people will run to it. I'm like, well, why are you doing it? Because the only way to know if you would do better on a low FODMAP diet is actually get a food allergy test and get a stool test. So when they say polyols, this would also include things like xylitol and erythritol, which is why in those people it can cause a lot of stomach upset and things like that. But the biggest thing that I would tell you is for a lot of people is stop running to the sweeteners all the time and start enjoying food that actually has more of a bitter consistency as well. Guys, the actual sensation, the taste of bitter actually stimulates gastric secretions within your body, which is really good for things like stomach acid, pancreatic enzymes, bile release, and things like that. And that doesn't happen specifically when it comes to sweet. So thank you very much, Shannon, for giving us for asking that question. The next one comes from Wendy. Why do some women get kidney stones over and over? Well, one of the first things is that yes, women do tend to have kidney stones more than men, and I think one of the reasons is because it has to do with anatomy. So kidney stones can only be in an inflammatory environment, going back to inflammation. But women typically, it's easier for them to have an infection within the urinary tract. Okay, it's harder for a man to get a urinary tract, but it's a lot easier just based on anatomy for them to get some type of urinary tract infection. And guys, that urinary tract infection can actually go up, into the urethra, go into the bladder, it can then go up into the ureters and affect the kidneys. And if you know anybody who's had a kidney infection, it's very extremely painful, like just as painful as birth, as are kidney stones. So that's one of the reasons why women will tend to have more kidney stones or more inflammatory issues when it comes to the genitourinary system more than men. But here's what's interesting, because I remember I had a patient, and this was probably about 3 or 4 years ago, who suffered with kidney stones 2 or 3 times every single year. And he'd be passing kidney stones and be down for the count. And so he would tended to make a lot of kidney stones within the kidneys. And one of the first things that we ran on him, that we actually ran a stool test. And lo and behold, when you look at this coming from PubMed, and it says evidence for a distinct gut microbiome in kidney stone formers compared to non-stone formers. So one of the things that's interesting is you get a stool test and you look at what is growing within the microbiome, because certain bacteria will give off metabolic byproducts that can favor kidney stone formation. Once we actually cleared that up, got his gut microbiome in a lot better state, and it's been 3 years now since he has ever had any kind of kidney stone. And so, guys, that's why you have to look beyond the kidneys. But in order to keep your kidneys healthy, they can't be inflamed. You got to help with your blood sugars, especially. And then also you have to look at your gut microbiome. And that's why it's so important, guys, to be working with a Wellness Way doctor and to make sure that you're getting tested properly. So, Wendy, thank you so much for that answer, okay, or that question. Hope you enjoyed the answer. All right, Ricardo Brown, what are your thoughts on Kangen water, also known as ionized water? I absolutely love my water. I'm curious what your thoughts about it. So what about Kangen water? So I believe Kangen water, and I've heard of it before, actually has the ability to make water acidic or make water very alkaline, okay? Now, I will give you my opinion when it comes to this, because 10 or 15 years ago, and I actually visited the website, and I thought they talked about drinking water and why it should be alkaline, and it leaves my head shaking. And the reason why is because of this. I want you to think of what needs to happen first in order for you, anytime that you eat, okay? The first thing that it has to happen is it has to go into the stomach, and it needs to be very acidic in order to sterilize it, okay? So if you were to drink some water and there are parasites in it, well, if you have proper stomach acid, it helps to kill off those parasites. My question to anyone who's promoting alkaline water is, why would you drink alkaline water only then to force the stomach to have to acidify it in order to be able to kill off anything. So the only thing that alkaline water does is it does not make your body alkaline. It forces your stomach to work harder in order to make more acid, in order to bring it up to, or bring it down to a certain pH level, so that it's ready to go on to the next mixing phase in the duodenum. And so that's why one of the things I leave shaking my head is people touting the effects of alkaline water when all it's going to do anyway is it needs to be acidified when it goes to the stomach. And so the only thing that it would do is put more stress on the stomach and actually leave you open for having more issues in regards to bacterial overgrowths, parasites, and things like that. And so what kind of water should you be drinking? I think that you should be drinking water that has been filtered, yes, at like things like reverse osmosis, but I think it should be actually pH neutral, or maybe at a pH of 7.5, because when you do add in minerals, it will make it slightly alkaline, but definitely not in the 8 to 9 category, because you're just putting more stress on your stomach. And remember, we have an epidemic, I believe, of people with low stomach acid because of stress. Nobody ever produces too much stomach acid. It's impossible. But it's very easy to produce low stomach acid because stress will lower, because of fight and flight will lower your stomach acid production. And that's what most people are actually suffering from as well. So in my opinion, I appreciate the question, but this would be a pass from me. And it's also just a lot cheaper just to be drinking, filtered spring water that is relatively pH neutral. Okay. All right. Melody has a great question. It is known exactly what causes leaky gut. Okay. And can anyone avoid it completely? The goal should be to have no IgG reactions. All right. So let's talk about leaky gut. Okay. Leaky gut is very hard. It's not something that you can say you definitely have a leaky gut. The reason why, when you look at the gastrointestinal barrier, it's not an impenetrable castle wall as much as it's more like a castle wall that will open up like a drawbridge. Okay. So typically when we look at leaky gut, you can say, yeah, you tend to have an intestinal barrier that tends to allow a lot of proteins through. So one way to know, hey, do I have a leaky gut, is look at an IgG food allergy test, and you will see that people have a lot of food allergies and a lot of IgG reactions. So what happens? Protein leaks through the gastrointestinal barrier, has an immune response, and you produce antibodies to it. I absolutely love when a medical doctor looks at an IgG food allergy test and says, oh, you just have exposure to it. Well, the reality is you're not supposed to have exposure to food. So the more that gastrointestinal barrier malfunctions and gets inflamed and starts to decrease the integrity of that barrier, then you tend to have more food allergies. Okay. I've seen as many as 48 when we've tested 115 of them. But guys, I've also seen people who have had their immune system destroyed with cancer treatment, chemotherapy, and have come back with only 2 food allergies. I've also seen people who have been on long-term corticosteroid use, and they only have 2 or 3 food allergies as well. That's because the B lymphocytes have been killed off, and they don't have the capacity to have an antibody response, not only to food, but really to anything else as well. That's why when people are undergoing chemotherapy, that's why they say, hey, you're immunocompromised. That's why they're always doing a CBC with a differential, because they're like, you're immunocompromised right now. We killed off too many white blood cells. You can't do chemo right now. So what causes a quote unquote leaky gut? Number 1, low stomach acid. Number 2, the ingestion of toxins. And I would say the number 1 is actually glyphosate or Roundup, specifically on things like oats, specifically on wheat having the highest concentration, but it's also going to be at lower levels in things like corn and soybeans as well. But the highest concentration is actually going to be on wheat, and it's going to be on oats, because they use that to desiccate the wheat once it's already matured. So it doesn't have an opportunity. It's going to be right there on the actual wheat germ. Okay. Glyphosate is one. If you look at glyphosate, it messes up the gastrointestinal barrier. It also severely interferes with liver enzyme manufacturing. So it impairs the body's ability to be able to detox as well. So I would also say wheat gluten. We've done videos on this as well. Wheat gluten will cause kind of the gateway towards having a leaky gut, because the actual gluten protein actually signals the barrier, the drawbridge to open up, which is why if people eat a lot of wheat gluten, then anything that they're eating it with also tends to become a food allergy. So if you look at pizza, for example, a lot of wheat gluten, people, then it also has a lot of cheese, a lot of black and white pepper, a lot of tomato on it. Um, so this is why people eat a lot of pizza. You tend to see a lot of the other foods develop as a food allergy as well. Medications will do it, like pain medications, antibiotics. And then also, guys, if you've lost your gallbladder, be prepared to have a lot of problems with the gastrointestinal barrier, because you've lost the sensory organ that knows exactly how much bile to secrete to be able to break down and emulsify your fats and transport them across the gastrointestinal barrier to use with hormone production specifically. Okay. Now, is the goal to have no IgG reactions? That's pretty much impossible. Okay. But what we want to see is we want to see, because looking at a food allergy test, we're taking into a lot of things in account. How well you're breaking down your foods. Do you have enough stomach acid? Do you have enough digestive enzymes? Do you have enough bile? Not only that, is how strong is the immune system response. So sometimes actually I want to see more food allergies in people, especially if they've been immunocompromised. But a lot of people, if they're starting off with 26, just like we had a woman today, she started off at 26, a lot of gastrointestinal issues. We help with that barrier function. And then we just redid her test, and she went from 26 down to 10, and no issues when it comes to her with bloating, with bowel movements. One of the interesting things is that her menstrual cycle came back, joint pain gone. She suffered with autoimmune uveitis, and all of those things are gone. We did a lot more things than just food allergies, but you look at her immune response and you can see that it went from being very inflamed, very angry, back down to normal levels. So great question, Melody. Hope that makes sense. Thank you so much for your question. David Sprague, awesome question. I love this in the questions on performance and things like that. What are your thoughts on creatine supplements? Are they, is it something that you recommend? All right, so let's look at creatine. This is probably one of the most studied exercise supplements that are out there. Am I opposed to creatine supplementation? Actually, not at all. I actually do take creatine, and creatine doesn't necessarily build muscle. It really doesn't even make you stronger, but what creatine does is it helps you to recycle your ATP within the mitochondria so that you have quicker recovery from muscle function. So it really doesn't build muscle as much as it says, hey, I could do this exercise at a certain weight for 8 reps. I went on creatine after 2 weeks. I was able to do 10 reps instead because it prevents the muscles from fatiguing not as fast. Okay. Now, so I'm not opposed to creatine at all. But I will also tell you this, is that if creatine, you start taking it and it helps you tremendously, then chances are your problem is probably with methylation. And so you probably need some extra methyl donors, and that you may find that you don't need creatine quite as much. So usually with people, and creatine helps them a lot, I'm like, you probably have a problem with methylation, in which you probably need some more methylfolate and methyl B12, methylcobalamin. You probably need some extra methyl donors. But when you actually give creatine, it actually can help spare some of those methyl donors to do some other things, like make dopamine, to make adrenaline, to be able to make serotonin, and so to help with detoxification. And so it will kind of spare those methyl donors to be used towards, I think, more important processes. So all basically, creatine is it basically comes from carnitine and methylated into creatine, and it's helping with methyl function. So I would actually say if it helps you quite a bit, awesome. But probably you need probably some extra methyl donors, and I would probably look at things like homocysteine and things like that to see, kind of how you're methylating, because deficiency of methyl donors actually can lead to heart disease. It can lead to depression, fibromyalgia symptoms, and things like that. So, David, thank you so much for that awesome question. Vivian, I hope you're watching right now. Vivian asks, in a video that I did before on best supplements for the flu season, mentioned vitamin D3 and K2. This is also echoed by another doctor saying you need to be on this as well. But vitamin K has blood clotting properties and should be avoided, especially post-pandemic with having an infection. Can you explain why this happens, why you recommend the two together? Okay, so think of this is there's two different kinds of vitamin K. There's vitamin K1. Vitamin K1 actually comes from green leafy vegetables. Vitamin K1 is assisting in the clotting mechanism, okay, in which you actually need that. What we're talking about is vitamin K2. Vitamin K2 has to do with calcium regulation, and where you actually your most abundant forms of K2, where you're coming from, is it's actually coming from the colon and the microbiome, and it's also coming from fermented foods. So we used to get a lot more vitamin K2 because we used to actually eat a lot more fermented foods. This is, things like sauerkraut, for example, is a great source of vitamin K2. The reason why you want to take vitamin D3 with K2 is because vitamin D actually increases blood calcium, okay? And so vitamin K2 actually helps to keep it out of the arteries and into the bones. That's why if you look at research with vitamin K2, you'll look at research of how vitamin K2 actually can prevent calcification of your arteries and other areas as well. But vitamin K2 can also help if people have plaquing, help the plaquing to be able to dissolve. And that's actually has been well researched. So you don't want to be taking vitamin D by itself and to increase your calcium only for it to be deposited in the arteries, which is why everything at the time we recommend vitamin D3, it's also coupled with vitamin K2. The other thing is too, guys, taking too much vitamin K1 is not going to cause you to have so many blood clots. The reason why people tend to clot actually has to do with inflammation. People who are very highly inflamed, the body will actually make a high level of platelets. And so if you look at people who have a high platelet count, the first thing that we're saying is this person is actually very inflamed. So if you try to, say that with, the pandemic, who are the people who are having the clots? The people who are already inflamed, okay? That's why keeping your inflammatory levels as low as possible is not going to cause you to have a bunch of blood clots just because you're taking extra vitamin K1. So thank you very much for that question. And I love how you guys think, and I love how you guys try to work your way through it, and how you guys are getting the gear spinning with how to start thinking differently. Okay. So let me see if I got a couple of times. If you guys want to hang with me and see if there's any other extra questions, I'm going to scroll through the comments and see. Here's a comment, which is this. Can you please address A1C levels and fasting glucose despite a clean lifestyle? Still remains at 5.7. Triglycerides is at 50 now from 87. Thanks a ton. Okay. All right. So I will say this. So triglycerides being at 50, that's good. Just remember this is that A1C, basically your 90-day blood sugar average. Okay. That's why we don't really look at fasting glucose because you could almost get in a car accident right before your blood draw and you'll see your sugars actually be elevated. And so that's why having elevated A1C is not always just a sugar problem. Yes, you do, one of the issues is the overconsumption of simple carbohydrates. But if your triglycerides are actually low, I would say that's a good sign that the A1C is a good starting point in order to get A1C down. But how can you get your blood sugars down? Well, you also have to look at other things that contribute to elevated blood sugars. And one of them is doing a stool test and looking at your short chain fatty acid production, which is basically the microbiomes, how they're metabolizing insoluble fiber, resistant starches, things like that. And then the other thing too, especially if it's female related, so you actually have to look at your stress levels. So remember, being in a stressed state will mobilize blood sugars. And so that's why there can be a mental stress aspect to your blood sugars. That's why you got to look at, hey, how much mental stress do you have? How are you dealing with stress? Also, are you getting enough sleep that would chronically elevate cortisol levels? Are you getting 8 to 9 hours of sleep? What's looking at your short chain fatty acid production, what your stool tests look like. And so if it's staying at 5.7, then chances are it also would be testing your insulin levels too, because chances are there's still something that could be elevating your blood sugar. And again, another thing that elevate blood sugar is having an infection, too. So there's a lot of other things that can contribute to, and it gets a little bit more complex than just avoiding sugars to bring your A1C levels down. So thank you very much for that question. Okay. Let's see if we got some more. Zinc lowering, copper. So here's the thing with zinc, guys, is a lot of people have been taking 50 milligrams up to 100 milligrams of zinc indefinitely for a long period of time. Taking a zinc isolate will interfere with copper absorption. You do need copper function. I believe about for every 8 milligrams, you need about 1 milligram of copper. So copper is involved in a lot of different functions as well, also with hormone metabolism. That's why if you are supplementing with zinc, it should actually come from a food, which is why we recommend zinc in particular. That's why we're actually getting it from oysters from the Pacific Ocean, because they're going to be the least toxic as well. Also, having liver will have some zinc, and it will also have copper in it. So if you are not taking, you're just taking a zinc isolate, over time you can become very copper deficient. So you just got to watch out for that, especially. I'll give you a perfect example. We had a woman come in who's already had breast cancer, and she went through kind of the whole medical merry-go-round. Finally ended up remove the breasts, go on an aromatase inhibitor for 5 years, and even despite that, it wasn't a hormone production problem. It's what she could not clear her estrogens. And she was very, what we would call estrogen dominant, because she couldn't clear it out from her liver. But what was interesting is she had done a COVID protocol that she had been doing indefinitely. And actually, one of the supplements that she was on to help with COVID, with her immune system, was actually an aromatase inducer, meaning it speeds up the aromatization of testosterone into estradiol. And I'm looking at that, I'm like, you don't want to be on that right now, which is why, guys, if anyone ever gives you a protocol, I always say, if they're giving you a protocol, and it's not something they say, hey, I haven't tested you, do this short term to kind of get you out of a sticky situation. But anybody that is promoting a protocol to do long term, I'm going to tell you is that you want to avoid that, especially if they're not testing you. And you always want to think, what do they have to gain by me being on this protocol indefinitely? And what they have to gain is your money. Okay. So that's why you should not be on any protocols for a long period of time, for this very reason, is she was actually hurting herself and had no idea why. Is just because another doctor gave her a protocol without actually testing, without actually knowing, without knowing her history of having breast cancer. Okay. Why do I get a upset stomach when I take zinc, even with taking food? Because I probably would be taking it not as a zinc isolate. I would be taking it as a oyster meat. But guys, anytime that you take a high amount of minerals, especially on an empty stomach, it can make you very nauseous, but I would make sure I'm taking it with food, and also make sure that you have enough stomach acid for zinc absorption and also copper absorption as well. So stomach acid is going to be very, very important specifically. Is there a proper way, proper time or day for a menopausal woman to exercise? Yes, generally speaking, it actually should be in line with your circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm is basically your cortisol output throughout the day. So your cortisol naturally raises in the morning. It's what wakes you up. And it should peak out between 10 and 2 o'clock, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And that's when cortisol should be at its highest and then tapers off. So your exercise should follow when your cortisol is at its highest. And so you don't want to demand more cortisol by letting it taper off and you're working out at 8 o'clock at night when cortisol should be at its lowest. So the best time to work out if you are exercising in a way that's going to demand more cortisol would be from 10 a.m. to 2 o'clock p.m. during that time. If you can't get it in, the next best time would be first thing in the morning. If you can't do that, the next best time would be in the afternoon. And then the absolute worst time to do that would be at night. All right. So after 6 or 7 o'clock, working out that time from a cortisol perspective would be the actual worst time to do that. Okay. All right. Can you explain the cause of high platelet count again? It's going to be inflammation. So typically, if people are very inflamed, their bone marrow will kick out more platelets, higher amount of platelets, which is why the more inflamed you are, the more likely you are to clot. Okay. And so that means, like, if you have a problem in the cardiovascular system and you have an area in which you're getting blood flow that is becoming unstable because it's passing through an area of calcification with those platelets, if you happen to damage the lining of that endothelium, it's very easy to throw a clot, and then it travels downstream and then gets stuck or gets lodged in one of those downstream vessels. And that essentially blocks the blood to that area because of the clot. And then whatever that arterial supply feeds will actually not get any kind of oxygen and dies. So that can happen literally anywhere, but you'll notice it in the heart, and you'll also notice it within the brain. Okay. So that's why, inflammation, guys, is so important. That's why it is the root cause of every single thing out there. And that's why I will always say, guys, you got to know what inflammation is. You have to know inflammatory triggers. You have to know what inflammation is, what it's not. Guys, what we do is we are taught to suppress acute inflammation, which is good. And we're taught that chronic inflammation, don't do anything about that, and you can ignore that, which is why we have so many people that are taking so many drugs, why we have so many people that are taking hormone replacements, why we have so many women who are taking birth control. It's why we have so many people on high blood pressure medications, type 2 diabetes, with cancer, with thyroid issues, and anything like that, because it does come down to knowing how chronically inflamed you are, what causes it, what are your first steps in order to do. And guys, that's why from the Chicagoland area, please go to the top of the page and please get registered for the inflammation event. And I promise you guys, it will be worth your time. And you'll understand the first steps that you need to do in order to start handling the inflammation. And specifically, if you want to work with our office, that is the event that you need to be at, especially because it makes it a lot easier when I say, here, you need to do this, 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 and this. You will understand that makes a lot of sense as well. Okay. Last question, guys, and then I have to head out. Is yoga good at night? Yes, I would say that yoga is good at night. Remember, yoga and things like that is not going to cause an elevation of cortisol. It's not going to make you winded as well. That's why the things that will elevate cortisol the most are going to be long, moderate intensity, sustained cardiovascular exercise, which I actually think there's not really much of a benefit from doing that. If you're going to exercise, it should be very short, should be very intense. You should be doing weightlifting, but doing these 45-minute cardios and boot camps and, treadmill things. All of that's doing is demanding more cortisol, which after menopause, guys, your adrenals, the health of your adrenals is so important because it's where you're getting a lot of your hormone contribution from as well. So is it okay to do yoga at night? Yes, absolutely. I would also say if you are a cycling woman, then yoga and doing things like walking, mobility work, or doing weightlifting that's not elevating your heart rate would probably be the best things for you to do in week 1 of your menstrual cycle. But then also the most important one would be week 3 of your menstrual cycle, because you don't want to demand more cortisol and steal it from your progesterone. So that's why week 1 and 3, you got to keep the exercise light. Week 2 and 4, for women, you can go pretty much all out. In fact, it's actually preferred, especially in week 4, to say, because you need to drain all your hormones to get ready for the next menstrual cycle. So guys, if you found this interesting, please share this video. Please tag someone if I answered a question you know that they can benefit from. And again, if you don't like our page, make sure you follow our page over at Exemplify Health Center. Also, Dr. Nathan Thompson. And then also make sure that you catch the replays on YouTube and also on Rumble. Make sure that you follow us on there as well. I would sincerely appreciate it. So guys, I hope you're well. I hope you're blessed. Thank you for joining me this whole time. I hope you have a great rest of your week and enjoy your holiday season, but not too much. Be well.